Hey, well, welcome back to Mentorship Monday. I'm Dr. Tom Miller. If this is your first session with us, welcome. This is actually lesson 4 in our 90-day mentorship series. And if you've been with us the last few weeks, you know that we're building this step by step. So in lesson 1, we focused on how you think as a leader and the importance of shifting from reacting to the present to planning for the future, right? And in lesson 2, we talked about clarity, consistency, and communication and how stability is created through disciplined leadership. And lesson 3, last week, we went deeper into culture and we introduced the idea that most schools don't have an accountability problem, they have a belief problem. So we walked through the culture equation, values, beliefs, behavior, actions, results, right? So your values drive your beliefs drive your behavior drives your actions, and your actions gives you your ultimate results. So if you challenge the way you look at your organization and ask, are we operating by design or operating by default? And again, if you missed any of those sessions, strongly encourage you to go back. And I've tried to make this, very simple for you. You can access the recordings through the podcast or through our YouTube page. You can download the summary sheets, review the show notes. Be a great opportunity for you and your team to listen to this, once a week. You could listen to it, all together, or say, hey, everybody, listen to every lesson, and we'll come together. So during your tactical meeting or your strategy meeting for the week, you can spend 15 minutes, talking through the show notes. So everything is organized for you. The link is right there in your notes. Because this session today is going to directly continue to build on that foundation. And we're going to answer a critical question that if culture is driven by beliefs and reinforced through accountability, then how do you actually move the people, right? How do you shift your team from awareness to alignment to ownership? And the answer is this. You don't actually try to change everyone. In fact, you don't try to change anyone, right? You focus on the group that determines your culture, and that is the group who's in the middle. In the middle. We'll talk more about that. So this session, we're going to talk about how to move the middle and build a culture of collective responsibility. So here we go. Uh, let me share with you one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make when trying to change, right? They focus on the wrong people. They spend their time trying to convince the resistance or relying on their strongest people, and they ignore the group that actually determines the overall culture, and that's the middle, okay? So every organization has three groups of people. You have the people who are aligned. It's probably about 25% of your organization. You have the people who are resistant. That's another 25%. Sometimes it seems like a lot more than that, right? Because they could be really resistant. And then you have the middle, right? You get your middle 50%. And that group, like they're watching, they're listening, they're deciding. So culture is not set by your strongest people. It's set by what your middle group believes and the actions they take, right? What they believe to be true, what they believe to be their next step. So, again, most leaders spend their time trying to win over the resistant, right? That bottom 25%. But high performing leaders, they do something different. They create clarity. They communicate, they listen, they observe, they ask questions, they clarify, and they move the middle. So let me make this personal for a minute here because I didn't always understand this as a leader, and I'm still definitely learning it. Um, you know, when I was a teacher, so you're talking 20, 25 years ago now, all I wanted to be was a leader, right? I wanted to be the one in charge. I wanted to be the one on stage. I wanted to be the one, the one with the badge, right? And, in my first years, I was a special ed teacher and I taught students with autism. Most of my students were nonverbal. some kind of violent. They had challenges, but it was probably the best job I've ever had besides this one. And so I was given an opportunity by our principal. I was asked to help a couple of other teachers with their classroom management. And instead of leading and embracing, I judged, right? I basically just handed them a training brochure to a training that I went to. I didn't lean in, I didn't support them, I didn't help the administration. Because in my mind, if I wasn't the official leader, then it didn't really count as leadership. In fact, I believe I badmouthed the principal to those people for asking me to do it. Now that I think back, I truly missed an opportunity to lead. I didn't lead up to my principal. I didn't lead across to my colleagues and peers. I was looking down, honestly, at all of it. So it wasn't until I started to study leadership, so you're talking 2014, 2015, which was, you know, a decade later. It's when I really started to realize something. That leadership is not a position, it's not a title, it's not a degree, it's not a certification, it's influence. And this connects directly to what we'll talk about today. Because the middle is watching. They're just not responding to titles. They respond to behavior. They respond to consistency. They respond to influence. And I wish that I could actually share with you that I learned the lesson right away, right? But I didn't. I mean, years later, when I was working in the Office of Charter Schools, in North Carolina Office of Charter Schools, at the time there was only two of us as consultants. There was 100 schools in operation. There was 300 applications that just came through the system, like all sorts of initiatives. And again, there was only two consultants in the whole office, and everything came through me. And I was involved with every new initiative. And to be honest, like I really felt like the guy, right? I had my badge, I had my stage, I had the schools I was responsible for. Like most calls came through me. But then the organization grew and we added people to our team. We were building a team and something happened. My role, my calls, they all started to shrink. And instead of seeing that as like growth and opportunity for the others we hired, I took it personally. I felt devalued, I felt unimportant, and eventually I quit. I walked away from the growing organization that truly had a need, all because I didn't understand my role as a leader. And it wasn't necessarily, communicated and it wasn't clear. Like where my boss saw it as empowering others, I saw it as a penalty. Where it could have been a chance for me to focus on my two or three initiatives and get really good at it and mentor around the other people and equip and multiply, the people that we were hiring. I I withdrew. And I shared those stories with you because I'm working in your school right now. Now, I, personally am not, but my personality is, right? My hungry, driven, personality is in your school. And I don't understand what leadership is. Now, to be very honest, did all that lead to something else? Yes. I quit that job and I launched this company, right? And so that's not the point. The point is, I chose my ego over the mission. I didn't understand that as organizations grow, leadership shifts. And this is critical for you as leaders to know and understand. So no matter where you are on this call, whether you're the head of the organization or maybe you're a teacher, maybe you're a coach, maybe you're somewhere in the middle, somewhere at the top, doesn't matter. As your organization grows, you need to feed your top performers. You need to develop your people. You need to expand your team, but you also have to clarify, define roles and clearly connect those roles to the mission. Because if you don't, the people will fill those assumption gaps themselves. And when they do, you get confusion, frustration, and disengagement. So a great book that John Maxwell wrote, there's a few that actually his lessons got me thinking on. The first is Leadership. It's a great book, but we've led lots of schools through the book study. And it's 11 essential shifts that leaders make, right? As they either get promoted or the organization grows. That's one. But the second one I want to talk a little bit about here is the 360-degree leader, 360-degree leader. And another lesson that I call the relationship compass. So let's make this practical. Think about from this perspective, right? No matter where you currently are in your organization or on your team, you have influence. So think of your leadership like a compass, right? So if you were to draw a circle, okay, draw a circle and just put a dot right in the middle. And that dot, that's you, right? And so the first question you need to ask yourself, right, is would I follow me, right? Would I follow me? Like how well do I lead myself? Okay. And if you pointed an arrow down, if you drew an arrow down, right, that's leading down. Draw an arrow across, it's leading across, and an arrow up, leading up, right? So, and I'll go a little bit deeper on each of those in a second, but culture is not driven by one leader. It's shaped by the leaders at all those levels, right? You in the middle, everybody across, everybody below you, and everybody above you. So if you're a mid-level leader, right now. So someone who's sitting in the middle of your organization chart, could be an assistant, principal, director, maybe like a team lead, right? A department lead or a department chair. You're not stuck in the middle. You're positioned to move it. See, you influence what gets reinforced. You influence what gets ignored, and you influence what becomes normal. So here's what I want you to really think about this week, right? Where do I have influence that I'm not using? Where am I waiting for permission instead of leading? And what is in the middle, right? What is in the middle learning from me right now, right? Or who is in the middle learning from me right now? Let me go back through. I want to go back through that leadership, compass piece because there's some really important pieces here that I don't want to miss. So when I'm leading at the top, right, or when I'm leading myself, that's the first most important part. How well, right? How well am I leading me? And I think the question that we have to really always ask ourselves is is would I follow me, right? Would I follow me? Okay. So that means I'm showing great character. I understand the goals of the organization. Okay. Such a critical part, right? And when I'm leading across, okay, these are individuals who might be at the same, level as I am. So they could be other teachers, they could be other, department heads, right? And so someone may ask, why is it important, right? Why is it important that I learn to lead across? Well, because eventually you will lead some of those people, right? If you get promoted into the organization, you may at some point be their boss, be their supervisor, right? And so it's important that you build influence all the time, no matter where you are. You're working to build influence through relationships, through rapport, through helping other people, okay? And this is probably one of the most underdeveloped and and misunderstood leadership skills, right? Leading across means influence your peers, right? So again, to reinforce expectations in conversations, support alignment at meetings, address, behavior respectfully. Okay. And if you're in some of our, systems and programs, you've learned the VRUOL model, right? Right. How do you have those, difficult conversations with peers? Because the culture is going to strengthen when we hold peers to that standard, right? So that's leading across. Now, leading down, right? Um, again, so this could be if you're someone's direct supervisor, or you've got, direct reports. It could also be leading students. It could be leading third, party contractors, like all like sorts of things. So if you lead people, your job is clarity and reinforcement. So you want to set expectations, make sure, follow through happens, address issues quickly, and recognize alignment, right? And so remember, what you tolerate becomes your culture, right? So we've talked about leading yourself. Everything starts here. Before you move anybody else, you have to be aligned yourself. So you're showing up prepared, following expectations, modeling discipline, okay? Because you can't ask others to do what you're not doing. Okay, leading down, right? Your job's clarity and reinforcement. You're leading across, right? This is the one where you're influencing peers, you're reinforcing expectations. Like you're that maybe vision carrier and vision caster in those meetings. And when you're leading up to others, like this is where a lot of people hesitate. But if you want to influence culture, you got to lead up, right? So you got to communicate what you're seeing, offer, solutions. And if your leader is coming to you for ideas or thoughts, like that means that you have influence with your leader. So, make those things happen. Ask good questions. Make sure you understand the leadership priorities, right? You value what they value because great leaders don't wait for direction, right? They help really, really shape it, right? So again, if you're leading the organization, your focus is creating clarity, building systems, holding others accountable, right? Your job is to create the environment where that middle can move. And if you're a mid-level leader, you're the bridge, okay? You translate vision into action, you influence the middle more than anybody else, okay? And again, you're not stuck in the middle. You are positioned to move it. So even if you're not in a formal leadership role yet, the best thing you could do is lead yourself and do your job really, really well. That's one thing that I hear and see very often is, folks want to move up the ladder or how do I get a raise or how do I get this title? The first question I always want someone to answer, like, how great am I at my current role? Right? Am I killing it? Like, am I crushing it? Like, does anybody ever worry about me? And if I don't know that, you have to ask. You have to ask your direct reports, hey, give me some feedback. How could I do this better? Am I right? And then you could take on other challenges. I see lots of people who are hungry. They want to take on other challenges, but they don't take the time to really look at how well am I performing my actual tasks? Okay. So lead yourself well, model expectations, and influence peers. Don't be like me. That was bad mouthing from the middle, bad mouthing the individual who actually saw me in that leadership role. Okay. So your consistency today is going to build your influences for tomorrow. Okay. So I want to come back to that, close. So I wanted to make sure that I got a chance to really hit that 360 model. Okay. And make sure you can start to take that information and really think about where am I in the compass. So if you look at that circle and if your dot's in the middle and you could start to list out all the people, right, who's across, and then ask, right, what's my level of influence with everybody in this room? Because every room you walk into, you're going to have a different level of influence with everybody in that space. And you build influence by following through, okay? Following through, being the best you that you can be. So let's just make sure we've got our action steps in play here, right? So this is what I want you to think about. Number one, where do I have influence that I'm not using? Where do I have influence that I'm not using? Is there a particular skill? Is there things that folks have come to me about, like certain, challenges or ideas, right? Am I seen as a person of influence in my organization or in the community? Right? Where am I waiting for permission instead of leading? Like if you see a gap, if you see a strategic gap, or if you know that this is something that's on your leader's plate that they just can't get to it, like offer it up, offer it up. Odds are your leader if they're like me, they're probably holding on to too much and they need to empower more people. And they probably think you're too busy. Okay. So if this is a goal for you to help the organization move forward and you yourself ask, can I do this? Like I feel like I have a really good skill, or hey, can you clarify your vision? Because I really want to make sure I do this well for you. Okay. And then the question number three is, what is the middle learning from me right now? Right? Am I who, and I've seen this a lot. I've actually seen leaders talk bad about other employees in front of people in the middle. So don't do that. Do not do that. Um, Anytime you're with someone from your middle of the organization, right? Three really great questions. It doesn't matter where you are in the organization. How are you doing? What are you working on? And how can I help? Okay. And then really think about how am I carrying myself in every hallway, every conference room, right? Is my body language where I need it to be? Am I using words that I should be using? Am I accidentally or intentionally dismantling certain aspects of the leader's goal? Yeah, I got to take a look in the mirror on that one because I wasn't always very good at it. I wasn't always very good at it. Okay. Because the middle is always learning something, right? They're always watching. They're always watching individuals, especially anybody with a title. So as you go on this week, stop trying to move everybody. Focus on the groups that determine your culture. Lead from where you are. Use your influence and build alignment around you, okay? Because remember, culture doesn't shift when just a few people change. It shifts when the middle is moving, right? So keep building, keep leading, and build what's next, all right? So we did have some questions that came in over the last week. So thanks so much. And we've got some folks that are in the session live. So if this lesson added value to you, first of all, right, make sure you and you're not here live in the call, subscribe, right, share. And that way you'll get the next call and share it out with your team. Download these, summary notes. You can get access to them. They'll be in the show notes. And if you're here live, it'll be on our weekly message out. Okay. So here's a question came from an assistant principal. And the question was, I'm seeing that things aren't aligned, but I'm not sure how far I should go. How do I lead without overstepping? Yeah. So again, just to kind of re-clarify, just basically what I just spent about, 20 minutes talking about is leadership's not, it's not about authority, it's about influence. And you're not overstepping if you're reinforcing agreed upon expectations. And you can always, clarify those, through your leader and you say, hey, I don't want to speak for Tom or Lauren. I said, but I've heard them say this, right? Or even, getting them back to the person that they probably need to redirect maybe their question or their issue to, right? So if we go back to how do I lead well in the middle, okay, how do I lead well in the middle? The one thing is to be there for that person, right? And to really seek to understand what their challenges is. And maybe one of the issues I think I've done in the past is I've just, given advice without it being asked of me. So one way to always do it, right, is just, oh, I'm sorry you're going through that. How can I help? Okay. How can I help? So you want to anchor, right, it always to school expectations, agreed upon systems, shared standards, and values. That's how you're always going to shape it when you're kind of readdressing. Then how can I best serve you with that, right? So it's not about what you think; it's about what we said we're all going to do. Okay, that we're all going to do. And I just remember, the school I was just at, we had for the most part, agreed and committed to using a shared, system of how we would put in, purchases and field trips and right. It was a systematic, program, but not everybody was doing it, and so that would frustrate certain, certain people. And I would always be like, hey, look, if you're higher on this work chart, it's your responsibility to go down to them and say, hey, I happen to see that you put the ticket in this way. Can you help me understand, right? And I'm happy to do it, right? For this time, but do you know about the ticket system, right? Do you need to be shown? And they may say, oh, it's just too hard, or I didn't have the time. Okay, I got it. But go back and re-clarify the why, right? We do it here so it doesn't get lost, or we do it here so like you don't ask me and I totally forget, right? Whatever the reason is we put the system in play is you want to bring always, someone back to, right? So some language around it, say, hey, I believe we said that we're going to handle those, situations this way, right? Or let's sure we're, aligned with our expectations here. You're not correcting people, right? You're not reinforcing the culture that you don't want to see. You're just bringing everybody back to the reason why we do it, but also take the time to listen to how come they're not doing it that way. And it could be that they didn't understand. So remember, the VRUOL process is vision, reality, understand, options, opportunity, and leadership, right? So vision, this is what we all agreed we would do it this way. The reality, you're using it this way. Help me understand, okay? And it's something, oh, I didn't know, or whatever, okay? So again, remember, you're not stuck in the middle. You're positioned to move it. So as an AP, part of your roles and responsibilities are to really get to understand the greater vision of your leader. So ask clarifying questions. Don't be like intimidated by it. Say, hey, I want to make sure I get this right. Can you give me 10, minutes to really walk me through it? Because a lot of people are coming to me asking me about it, and I want to be able to make sure that I clearly, communicate that, right? So it's great. And if you got a question and you're here live, you can drop it in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand and we'll get to it. Let's see, I got a couple other questions here. Well, here's another one. I've clearly communicated expectations, but behavior isn't changing. At what point does it become an accountability issue versus a leadership issue? Okay. Well, it's always leadership first. Okay. Leadership, everything rises and falls with it. So before accountability, I always ask myself, right, what role do I have in this problem? Was I clear? Was I consistent? Did I follow through? Have I taken them through kind of that VRUOL? Here's what we agreed to, but here's what I see you doing. Help me understand. Okay. I think that's critically important. And then once you in that understand, then you can find out, is this a clarity issue? Is it a consistency issue? Is it a skill issue? Is it a motivation issue? Right? Or is this a will issue? If you heard, lesson three, I talked a lot about beliefs drive behavior. And so it could just be, right, that most people don't want to look incompetent. So they'll stick with what they're comfortable with. So go back and make sure that, that you've really coached and gotten really curious with the person, with the letter U, the understand. And then, right, with O, options or opportunities, like really talk through how they could do it, differently. Okay. Um, and then once expectations are clear and repeated and, reinforced, right? Then it starts to become accountability, especially when you can, praise the person for what they're doing. So the next time that they do it and they do it in a way that you want it to be done, make sure that you take the time to say, hey, thank you so much for using the Karina tool, right? Or yeah, hey, thank you so much for being at your door at 7:30. Or thank you so much for walking your students down the hallway this way. It really makes a great impact on the rest when the kids are quiet. Whatever it is, okay? Because remember, accountability is that I can count on you. That is the goal, right? I can count on you. It's not about being negative. It's just about I can count on you. So, but if the behavior isn't changing, then it definitely turns into a more of a personalized action plan. And so this is where it's important to understand, do they just honestly believe that it won't work? Or they just won't do it that way. And if they won't do it that way, then, maybe this isn't the right place for them to work. But I would definitely take the time to seek to understand Well, why don't you believe it'll work this way? What evidences do you have? And if you have, ways that you could show that it is working, right? And that's what you want, right? You're trying to get them, right? So, some things you could do, you could find out what are some other adults in your organization that they really buy into, and it's not about asking that, a person to drag them along, right? But it is about, communicating to them the social proof that other people are doing it this way. And it seems to be really working for them. Okay. But that's hard. Beliefs take a lot of time to shift. And, you have to see the good. You have to see the good in people. So just, remember, accountability begins where clarity and consistency have already been established. And that's a big part. All right. Let's look. We got nothing there. All right. Let's see. We got time for at least one more here. Uh, okay. How do you get the middle group to speak up and reinforce expectations instead of staying quiet? Oh, great question. So typically, the middle stays quiet because they're unsure. Um, they're watching, they're waiting for signals. They don't have a lot of trust yet, right? They're not really sure kind of where they fall. Like I think about this wall of silence that I read about, recently. It's like you know, it's like this quiet incompetency that they're just really just kind of hanging on and afraid to say something because they don't know the consequences, right? Or it really just comes down to trust. So, when you are working with your team, no matter what level they are, and listen, everybody, just because someone has a college degree doesn't mean that they know how to write an email, have an adult parent conference, or grade papers, or just be a professional. So one thing you got to do is you got to build safety through clarity, right? Make expectations very simple, very visible, very repeatable, and praise the behavior you desire to see, and really work hard to make sure you're not praising or reinforcing negative behavior. Because the people will speak up when they know what's right. Okay, when they know what's right. Is why I just think it's so important that leaders spend a lot of time with new hires and new teachers. And it doesn't mean they have to be like the full-blown beginning teacher coordinator, but they should be a part of it. Like the voice that your new hire should be hearing is yours. Yours or people that are in that top 25% group for sure. Because I'll never forget my first job as a director. We had this incredible young hire, super hungry, willing to do anything, and she immediately got brought in to like a negative force, which I didn't really see or understand the consequences. But what I realized is that this negative force was like trying to build numbers. Like they were trying to grow how many people were part of their pack in a sense. Because we had gone through like a massive kind of restaffing, right? And so it's important, right? So leaders have to address that misalignment right away and reinforce standards publicly, right? That doesn't mean that you address or you dress someone down in like public, that you continuously talk about vision, because vision leaks. Okay. It's like a raft with a lot of holes. You got to continuously communicate over and over and over again. And if you don't, those people will drift or be pulled into groups that, you know, their answer is this is how we do it around here, right? So the middle, if done well, mirrors leadership. Where do they see the most influence? Do they see it from the top of the organization, right? The people who are in charge, or are they seeing it from just the people who have the most influence? Okay. So when somebody reinforces culture, call it out and celebrate it. and shift ownership from leadership holds the line to we all hold the line. We all hold the line. So the middle doesn't speak up because you asked them to. They speak up when they see it modeled, reinforced, and expected and expected. So it's a great one. And let's see here. I think we've got one more. I've got this is a good one. I pulled this one off of Facebook actually because I saw this and I thought this would be a great question for all of us. How do you handle a conference with an irate parent, especially when emotions are high and they're coming and upset or confrontational? It's a good one. So first, you always start with the right mindset. Okay. Most irate parents are not trying to be difficult. They're just trying to be heard. They're just frustrated. Okay. And emotion multiplies when concerns and fears and frustration. So don't take any of it personal. If you take it personally, you're going to lose control of the conversation. Your emotion is going to take over. All right. So if you're part of our self-aware leader series or our next series, we're going to do is the emotionally intelligent, school leader, but the self-aware leader, right? We talk about in our disc that graph number two, and we talk about like what's your personality quotient under stress or conflict, right? You got to look at yourself. I know me, I turn into a high DC. So I seek accuracy and control. And that's not healthy, right? That's how my personality shows up in those moments. And I don't need to do that. If I feel like I'm losing control of the conversation, I will like react. I will react and not so much like the best way. So control the environment, not the person, okay? You can't control their emotions, but you can always control the environment. Remember, leaders are the thermostat, okay? Not the thermometer, be the thermostat. You set the temperature of the room. You set expectations up front. You stay calm and steady. Don't try to match their tone, right? Just remind them of this is what, this is how we'll talk to each other. We're here, and I always start any of these conversations with, we're all here because we love your kid, right? We're all here because we want what's best for your child. We want them to feel safe. We want them to feel loved and cared for, right? We want them to learn, okay? So, I want to make sure, so the line could be, I want to make sure we have a productive conversation. So we're going to be solution oriented. We're going to really be focusing on the next steps. I want everybody, a chance to feel heard and have a chance, to share. So we're not going to talk over other people. We're going to wait, for like clarifying questions. We're not going to talk bad about other people either, right? And so, listen first, right? Don't get, defensive. And this is where I think a lot of leaders get it wrong. They start to, defend immediately. They start to take um, like inventory and they feel like they have to like get back on top. Okay. But, just let the parents speak, listen fully, take the notes, and, people will calm down when they feel heard. One of my, mentors, and she's amazing at this, Joy Warner, she'll start off these conversations with, tell me what are you most worried about? Like, what is keeping you up at night? Let's really find out. Like, let's dig below the surface and find out what the real issue is. Okay. And then once they've shared, like your job is to bring, clarity. And I think one good way to let others feel like they've been heard is to say, just repeat what you've heard. Like, hey, let me make sure I understand your concern is, right, XYZ. Is that correct? Or I want to make sure I heard you right. So this slows the emotion down. It creates alignment, right? And it starts to build rapport. And it moves from emotion to the issue. And then you stay anchored in your systems and expectations. Um, because you're not negotiating, the culture in that moment, where you're going to really stay, focused on the policy, right, or the process, and you're going to stay consistent, and you're going to have empathy without ever changing your standards, right? Part of it's usually a misunderstanding, and all this other, right? That's usually what happens is misinformation. So the goal is not to win the conversation. The goal is to move forward productively as a in a partnership or as a team. And, just by saying, here's what we can do moving forward. Okay, here's what we can do moving forward. So always important to protect your staff and your culture. Okay, don't undermine teachers. Don't make reactive decisions. Right? Don't make sure you are reinforcing expectations privately, right? If it's a redirect, and publicly if it's a praising moment. Because if you don't protect your people, your culture is going to erode, and those parents will, see that, and they can really, really disrupt. So at the end of the day, these conversations are not just about one parent, they're about your leadership, your systems, your culture. So always stay calm, stay clear, and lead the conversation. Do not react to it. Okay. Do not react to it. And I just love Brene Brown's work, right? Clear is kind, clear is kind. And don't avoid the hard conversation. That's what actually creates a bigger problem. So as soon as you can, right, have that conversation and get to clarity and move forward. So, all right, that is all the questions I see for this week. I love it. All right. So let me just kind of reiterate what we shared here today. We really, really focused on how do we move the middle, right? How do we move, the middle? So you this week you are going to ask yourself, where do I have influence that I'm not using? Where am I waiting for permission instead of leading? And what is the middle learning from me right now, right? How am I carrying myself, throughout the day? And if you're in our leadership programs, like you could go, deeper on this. If you should have access to our school leader made real simple program. We've got some great lessons around relationships in there and leadership in there. But probably the most popular one we have is becoming a school leader of influence. And I really go really deep on a lot of these other pieces, especially the relationship compass. So thanks for hanging in with me this week. We'll be live again next Monday. And always make sure you download the show notes and share this lesson with the rest of your team and have a conversation, right? How do we become better 360-degree leaders? Bye bye, everybody.